Today, we'll be talking about perceptual sets. So, perceptual set is a mental predisposition to perceive something one way and not another. All right, so that's the definition. That first bullet point is the definition. Mental predisposition to perceive something one way and not another. All right, so that's just, we naturally see things certain ways and not other ways. So if we believe we're going to see or hear something, we often do. So remember we talked about perception and top-down processing. Well, if you have expectations, like if I say, hey, is that Snoopy up there in the clouds? You're like, oh yeah, it does kind of look like Snoopy. An example, obviously, like I just said, is top-down processing. We've talked about how the influence of power, suggestion, subliminal perception can influence you. If you ever remember the show like The Mentalist, that's what he did all the time in there. And to a lesser extent, the show Psych does that as well, where they suggest things and it gets you thinking about it, right? And so it gets you thinking a certain way. So these perceptual sets are guided by your schemas. So remember, schema is something we've talked about throughout the year. It's concepts or mental frameworks that organize and interpret information. So, based off your schemas, your past experiences, that's how you're going to see things, right? That's how your perceptual set is kind of set up. So here's an example of schema. So if you look at this child drawing here, so children's drawings reflect their schemas of reality. All right, so it's how they see things, as well as their abilities to represent what they see. This drawing by 4-year-old Anna illustrates that the face has a far greater importance than the body in young children's schemas of essential human characteristics. So, and I've seen this with my own kids as well. Kids focus on faces. Remember we talked about even like babies, right? The thing they always point out in pictures is faces because that's what they see most of. So you see Anna drawing Adam and Eve here. Well, Adam and Eve have a head and arms and legs, but no body, right? And that's because the main focus of each Adam and Eve is their faces, because that's what's more important to them, right? That's their schema. So face schemas. When we meet in person, I'll show you this website. If I can find video of the post, I will. You have to look at, what's the real Margaret Thatcher. Kind of hard to, you're gonna notice it's kind of hard to see because we don't have a schema for an upside down face, right? So when we see people, we see just a regular face. You don't look at people upside down usually. So when you see an upside down face, you can't really tell that anything's wrong with it. But when I rotate it over, it looks really kind of creepy. So like I said, I'll show you that when we do our video meet. But in the meantime, why don't you look at this? So if you're looking at this video right now, just looks like 4 normal people smiling. Now what I want you to do is put your head upside down, right? Literally turn your head upside down and look at the picture. They look a little freaky, don't they? Right? That's because we don't have schemas for upside down faces, and that's what it is here. So we see their natural smile. Hey, everything looks great. It's the normal smile. But if you look at it upside down, everything's actually been reversed, right? So the smile has been reversed on their head, and they look really creepy. And once again, that's because we don't, as humans, we don't have schemas for upside down faces because we don't see people upside down. Context. Context is just a setting or environment in which we interpret sensory stimuli. So culture can influence how we perceive information. So your culture, how you grew up, what's important to your culture, that's all going to influence how you see things, right? So you could say something in one context. So when we're talking about context, we're talking about your environment. Well, if you say something, let's say in front of a group of friends, and then you say it maybe in front of your parents or a teacher, right? That context could be completely different depending on what you say and how you say it. So there's 3 main perspectives on context, right? So we have the nativist position. That's the first one. And they say people throughout the world view the world the same way because they share the same biological perceptual rules, right? So this one's saying we're all humans, so we're all going to view things the same way. The next one, the empiricist position. This is that people actively construct their perceptions by drawing on their prior learning and cultural experiences. So this one is kind of what we're talking about. Your perceptual set is kind of based off of, your schemas, right? Your cultural experiences. So everything you've kind of learned growing up and from the past too, that's what's been passed on in your culture. The last one, and I'll show some examples of this next, is a Carpentered world hypothesis. This one says people living in urban and industrialized environments where there are more right angles and straight lines will be more susceptible to the Müller-Lyer illusion than people in non-Carpentered natural environments. We're going to talk about the Müller-Lyer illusion in a second here, so you'll understand what that is. And this will make a little bit more sense to you. But essentially, if you live in an urban area, just think about the room you're in right now. I'm looking at the room I'm in, and I see right angles literally all over the place. The walls, the corners of the walls, the tiled ceiling, right? The table I'm at, the chairs, like everywhere I look around, I see right angles. Well, in certain cultures, especially ones that live more outside and not in the type of houses we're used to, they don't have those right angles. So that's why they're more susceptible to that Müller-Lyer illusion. And I'll show you a couple examples. So look at this picture. Think for a second, what do you see here? Well, they did a little study, survey, and they've asked people, what do they see here? What's above the woman's head? Well, in one study, nearly all East Africans who were questioned said the woman was balancing a metal box or a can on her head and that the family was sitting under a tree. Westerners, and we're Westerners, for whom corners and box-like architecture are more common, were more likely to perceive the family as being indoors with the woman sitting under a window. All right, so this is that last theory we talked about where in a Western society like what we live in, we see right angles all the time. So it's like, oh yeah, she's sitting under a window, right? You can see this is the corner of a room. Well, in East Africa where they don't, live in an industrial civilization like we do, and their houses aren't necessarily like built in squares like we are, maybe they're more rounded or whatever it is, and where it's common for women to carry things on their head, they're going to say, oh no, that's a box on her head, and obviously they're sitting outside underneath the tree because that's what they do, right? So that's their schema, that's their culture. All right, so perceptual organization, and we're going to focus on a few things. The Müller-Lyer illusion, which I was just talking about, size-distance relationship, and brightness contrast. So here's the Müller-Lyer illusion. So look at this. Which line do you think is longer? The one on top or the one on bottom? They are actually the same size. And this is what the Müller-Lyer illusion says. The one on top, because the arrows go in like this, it draws your eyes in. So it makes it look smaller than it actually is. The one on the bottom, because the lines go out, it makes it look bigger than it actually is. All right, so it looks like the one on the bottom is bigger, but in reality, from point A to point B, right, it's actually the same size. What about here? All right, most people, which one's bigger, A to B or B to C? Most people think AB equals BC, that they're the same lines. But in reality, A to B, this first line right here, is actually much longer than B to C. All right, so if you want to take like a little ruler up to your computer screen, you can actually measure it. But once again, this is the Müller-Lyer illusion. Because A to B has these arrows going in, it makes it seem smaller than it actually is. Where BC, they go outwards, makes it look longer than it actually is. Once again, you see the Müller-Lyer illusion here. Which one do you think is bigger? This line or this line? So obviously, you should know by now, this one, it looks smaller than it actually is. They're actually the same size. So if you were to measure it, but this draws your eyes in, this draws it out. So when you're trying to take pictures of this for your picture project, this is one you can do. Like if you can find a room that has two different angles like that, and you can draw the lines with the ceilings and something else, I know I could do it like in my classroom, there's an angle you can do it. But in different places where you have different walls like this, you can kind of see how the Müller-Lyer illusion would work. Size distance. All right, so if you look at the picture on the left, is this girl just a giant and she is a midget? No, they're actually, somewhat similar sizes. But we perceive the room um, to be a square, right? Because that's what we're used to. We're used to looking at rooms as either rectangles or squares. So that's how we assume this room is. But in reality, it's actually a trapezoid. So if you look at this picture over here, the girl on the right is actually closer to us, and the ceiling goes down a little bit, right? So her head is close to the ceiling, and she's closer to us. So when we talk about depth perception, we talk about size distance. So things closer to you look bigger. So she looks like she's a giant, but in reality, she's just closer to us, and that's why she's bigger, right? So things that are farther away from us are smaller. So that's why the girl on the left is farther away. That's why she looks smaller in the picture. But your brain naturally thinks that a room is going to be a square or a rectangle, and that's why it looks off to us. Brightness contrast. And we've talked about this a little bit before. So um, the gray is the same shade. So the gray on the left and the gray on the right is the exact same shade, but yet it looks brighter with the black. That's because it's a bigger contrast. So the more contrast, it makes the gray pop more. It makes it stand out more. So just like on the website that either I've shown you or I will show you with the green and the pink squares, it's the same thing. So this is something like if you want to be an interior decorator, you should know or you'll be good at it because you know how to pair certain colors together, right? Because certain colors will make other colors pop. And that's what brightness contrast is. Because the gray on the right contrasts with the black more, it makes the gray look brighter. But in reality, they're the exact same gray. It's just when the gray is by the white, it makes it look duller. And the last one for this set would be the Ponzo illusion. So the human mind judges an object's size based on its background. That's what the Ponzo illusion says, right? So these converging lines indicate that the top line is farther away than the bottom line. So something we'll talk about, if you see these parallel lines of the railroad track, right, we know they're converging together, which means they're getting farther apart. So even though these two red lines are the same distance, or sorry, the same size, so we know because of the converging lines that it's farther away because of where it's located on the tracks. So once again, as the parallel lines converge, the top line is farther away because of where it's located on the converging lines.